Hello and welcome to multi-room test session training. We will be looking at familiarizing you with what multi-room test sessions are, what your role is during the situations, and how to ensure a successful multi-room test session. So according to the 601-4, a multi-room test session is described as a situation where MEPS personnel, whether it be a TA or an ITA, serve as the lead TA and test monitor for tests administered in more than one room, where we use additional TAs or school staff or a combination of the two as assistant TAs. So during the Dallas Mega Test Day, most of their test sessions are multi-room test sessions because they're testing such a large volume of students at one time. As a result, the multi-room session will be scored as one session. So in reality, we only really need one 601 that has all of the information on it. So your recruiters can sign 1601, and depending on the size of your test, you may need to have a second copy of the 601 or have the recruiter sign on the back. As long as we have all those personnel that are assisting as proctors sign that they were present and accounted for on your 601. Your role during the multi-room test session is that of test monitor, which means that you will not administer any tests. You will not act as a proctor to any tests. As a test monitor, you are there to ensure that test security and accountability is maintained and that test administration is done in accordance with our rules, policies, and procedures. If there's a test material that doesn't get used because they didn't have as many students for testing as they had projected, or they reduced the number of classrooms, or whatever the reason may be, you are responsible for that test material, so you need to make sure that that is secure. You will also ensure that recruiters do not relieve the assistant TAs and are left alone with test material at any time. Most of the schools that you'll be going to will already have some system in place where additional school staff will act as backup TAs in the event another teacher needs to take a break or what have you. But that is what you are responsible to do. So you will be moving throughout the testing area in order to ensure that security, accountability, and administration is in accordance with regulations. So we are going to move into some ways to ensure that you have a successful multi-room test session. Key in doing so is communication with your school and preparation before the test occurs. In preparing for a multi-room test session, communication is vital. Now, the regulation requires that you make contact with your school at least 5 days before the test is supposed to happen. However, in a multi-room test session, it's important that you contact your school POC early and often if necessary, because there's a lot of coordination that goes into a multi-room test session. So in addition to the regular confirmation questions that you ask about start time, number of students, etc., you need to be specifically asking questions that involve the number of classrooms that you'll be required. This is important because you'll need to know how many individual kits you'll need to break down your test material into in order to accommodate the assistant TAs. You also need to know how many students they expect to be in each room. Also important for your kit breakdown that you have sufficient test material ascribed to the assistant test administrators at the beginning of the testing session. The test start time is important only because you need to know that based on the number of students that you'll be testing and how many assistant TAs you'll be working with, that your normal 30-minute arrival time may not be appropriate. You may need to get there an hour, hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours before the test is scheduled to begin based on the number of test administrators you have assisting you with the test session. And also ask if there are any special instructions that need to be adhered to, if there are special situations, if there are special accommodations, if you will be in specific parts of the building, or in particular how the classrooms will be broken down. I know some schools will provide you with a breakdown of the teachers, how many schools, and they will provide that via email in a spreadsheet if you request, things like that. The more information that you have concerning this multi-room test session, the better prepared that you can be. So ask as many questions. If you run across something in your preparation that you didn't ask the first time, do not be afraid to contact the POC in order to get more information. It's beneficial in ensuring that you have a successful test session, not only that security and accountability is maintained properly, but that the customer, the school POC, is satisfied with the service that you provide. As I stated earlier about communication being vital, some of the questions that you have to ask are in order so that you can properly prepare for the test session. So for preparation and in response to some of the communication issues that you or questions that you asked, total number of rooms that would be used, as well as the total number of assistant TAs, would lead you to preparing your educational staff agreements. You will be using the voluntary staff agreements because the school has already agreed to provide the assistant TAs through the coordination of the test coordinator before we even assign the test sessions to you. So we don't expect them to be paid. If that was the case, you would know beforehand that they will be some form of reimbursement. But in an effort to have a successful session, the teachers have already agreed to volunteer their assistance in conducting the test session. So you will use the voluntary educational staff agreements. That is the short form that only has the top portion. So you need to have enough educational staff agreements on hand with you the day of the test in order to ensure that everyone has one completely filled out before the test session starts. If you have the information about the names of the assistant TAs who will be providing assistant TA support, then you can go ahead and put that information in the forms. I believe everyone was sent a copy of these forms, an electronic copy. They are PDF fillable, so you can type directly onto the form and print them out beforehand if necessary. If you'd rather not do that, handwriting it is fine. We don't have a problem with that. Just be sure that it is legible. As far as proctor support, one of the biggest issues that we have with multi-room test sessions, especially on a mega test day, is sufficient proctor support. On this particular day, there'll be like 50 schools testing in the Dallas MEPS area of responsibility. So the number of personnel available to proctor from the recruiting services is going to be limited. The one good thing about multi-room test sessions is that generally this TAs only test approximately 25 or fewer students. And according to the regulation, if a school staff is acting as a test administrator and they have 25 or fewer students, you do not have to have an additional proctor. So if you get there the morning of and you learn that you don't have enough proctor support for each classroom, then it would be wise to only put proctors in those classrooms that have a student to TA ratio of 25 or more, because the TA that's provided by the school does not need one according to the regulation. In addition to the educational staff agreements, you'll also need the receipt of ASVAB test booklets. You will be providing your test material to these assistant TAs, and as the regulation stipulates, you are responsible for security and accountability as the procurer of these test materials. So you will provide an inventory to the test administrative assistant via these forms. You should also have received a copy of this form via email, and it can be electronically filled out beforehand. Preferably, we like them, at least the test book information, to already be filled out before the test session. That makes it easier to distribute the test materials. It is also part of your kit build out, which I'll talk about in just a moment. There is a example of both the educational staff agreement and the receipt of ASVAB test booklets on the next slide so that you can have a better idea. And if you do not have access to these forms already, then let us know so that we can email that information out to you. But the completing of the form is pretty self-explanatory. You annotate by version number and serial number on the line provided the test material that you will be issuing to the assistant TA, including the total number of test booklets that you distribute. They will sign for those test booklets when you distribute them the books, and when they return the books to you, then you will sign on the bottom portion indicating that you received the test material that you provided out to them. In your kit build out, some of you have test sessions with over 500 students projected. As a result, I'm sending more than one test administrator to those locations. So when you get ready to prepare your kit for the test session, it will be a little different. Multi-test sessions will require an increased amount of pre-test prep work because of the amount of preparation that goes into it, and making sure that there is a test kit available for every assistant TA that you have participating. So your test kit will already have the receipt of ASVAB test booklets form with it. In addition, you will already have broken down the test material by the number of test booklets each TA is scheduled to receive. That means that you should already have pre-sorted your test booklets. Although these TAs have been trained to rotate the versions, I've learned that assistant TAs don't always follow our rules to the T. So it's easier for you and better for our policies if you pre-sort the test material for them. So that means instead of putting 5 copies of 23A, 5 copies of 23B, 5 copies of 24A, and 5 copies of 24B and stacking them accordingly, you need to rotate those out to ensure even distribution of the test material. So you'll rotate red, purple, yellow, orange in a similar format until you have reached the number of test material that is going to that particular test administrator. Now, when you put the information on the 601-4RE, you can put it in sequential order. That's fine. It should be that way in the first place. But when you actually get ready to distribute or build your kit, you should rotate your test booklets. You'll also need to make sure that they have an adequate number of answer sheets and scratch paper per kit, that per test administrator kit, in order to expedite distribution of materials. You will also be providing pencils, so if you need additional pencils, you need to let the MEPS know so that we can make sure that you have adequate pencils for the test sessions that are coming up. These are just copies of the Educational Staff Agreement for Voluntary Services and the Receipt of Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery booklets. These are the two forms that you need to be sure that you have adequate numbers of, in addition to your discrepancy list that you'll probably need to provide for each test administrator as well, and maybe a copy of your proctor support policies, what they outlined as them. You also have the option to brief all of the proctors on your own before you dismiss them to their classrooms, so that's up to you to do as well. Okay, so your arrival time should be in accordance with the time that you coordinated with the school POC during your initial communication, whatever that time may be, whether it's 30, 45, an hour, hour and a half before the test time is scheduled to start. Be sure that you provide enough time for yourself to get all of your material distributed, to brief your proctors, and to allow some time to brief the assistant TAs as well. Again, I do know that Dallas MEPS has a training session for their assistant TAs to help them to guide them through the process of test administration on the ASVAB. However, they had that training a few weeks ago, so some of that information may have been lost. So it may be important for you to reiterate and reemphasize some things as they pertain to security and accountability and test administration. The material distribution, if you have properly prepared and built out your kits based on the number of assistant test administrators you have beforehand, then it should be as simple as having them sign the ESAs for their support and then having them sign for their test material. However you choose to do that, you could have the briefing before you distribute the material to remind them of certain things. Then have them complete the ESA, and then as they leave for their room, they can be distributed their test material. But whatever system works for you is the system that you should use. In your material distribution, ensure that you point out to the assistant TAs that they may have additional test material left over that does not get used. They should not condense this material with any other classroom. When they sign the receipt of test booklets form, they are acknowledging that they are responsible for the test material that is identified on that form. So they are responsible for returning that test material to you at the completion of the test. So condensing it with another classroom or another teacher is not an option at that particular point. Also, re-emphasize that before the students are dismissed from the testing room, that all materials should be accounted and collected before doing so. Some teachers get a little ahead of themselves sometimes, and the kids are gone, and then you may have something missing, and now we have to track down a kid, which could prolong your time at the school. A system that I believe is helpful in ensuring that the TA not only follows the directions but makes it easier for you during the return time of your test material is using an envelope system, not the big envelopes that we provide to you already to return your test material in, but maybe a smaller envelope closer to a business size, 9 by 12, 8.5 by 11, because their test packets will be much smaller than what you may commonly return. And if this is something that you decide to use, then contact the MEPS and we will provide you with the appropriate size envelope in order to use this system. So you have the option of providing each assistant TA with the 601 so that they can provide the school code during the test administration process. However, you could provide them the school code on the envelope so that they know that that's the code that they'll provide during the administration of the test. You'll also want to make sure that they put their name and room number on the envelope and indicate the number of books that they actually used, how many answer sheets they have collected, and how many sheets of scratch paper they have collected. This will make it easier for you in the end to verify that or to record on the 601 the total number of books used, the total number of answer sheets and all that when you return all that material to the MEPS. During the administration of the test, as the test monitor, your duties will primarily be to ensure security and accountability and adequate and correct administration procedures during the test. So that may or may not require you to move throughout the building to ensure that everything is in accordance with the rules and regulations. Before you start that part of your role, you are responsible for accounting for any leftover test material. For whatever reason, you may not distribute all of your material as originally planned. If that happens, then make sure that you secure all accountable material. That could mean, obviously that means lock it in your case, but if you're going to be moving throughout the school, you probably don't want to be dragging cases or boxes around while you're moving around to make sure that everything is in accordance with regulations. So I would recommend that you secure that material in your vehicle until the so any empty cases that you may have, you could leave in the area that they have assigned to you as the central location for the assistant TAs. Once you've secured all of your accountable material, then you'll begin your test monitor duties. Now, I'm not suggesting that you move constantly throughout the test, but periodically you should make your rounds to make sure that they are following the policies in accordance with the regulations. For example, the test administration should start roughly about the same time for everyone that's administering the test. They should be roughly in the same sections of each test, of each subtest about the same time. So periodically you should move throughout the building where the tests are taking place to ensure that everybody is on track and that there aren't any complications, especially during the early part when they're still doing the personal data. The assistant TAs may have questions, and your presence may help to provide a smoother transition and get the questions answered correctly and not have them guessing and do things incorrectly. Once the test session is completed and administration is done, then you need to be in position and ready to receive test material as the assistant TAs return the material. You should probably give guidance to the TAs during your initial brief on how this process will work. I recommend that you help yourself by indicating to the assistant TAs that those books that are not used be bound together. I'm assuming that when you build out your kits and you create the individual administration kits for the TAs, that they will be bound by rubber bands. So I would recommend that you instruct the assistant TAs that to leave those books not used in the rubber bands. That way you can distinguish between the books that need to be cleaned and which books don't need to be cleaned. Conduct a textbook inventory per assistant TA. Essentially what you're going to do is verify that the number of test booklets that you provided them are the number of test booklets that you have returned. You'll confirm the serial numbers later when you get home to ensure that everything is there. Conduct a quick page check on the books before signing the 601 4RE that everything is there and accounted for. Collect the test material as far as the answer sheet, scratch paper, and pencils. If you use the envelope system, then you should be collecting an envelope and your pencils only. Once you've collected all of your test materials, then obviously you pack up your cases and you'll be done with the session for the day. If there were special instructions or accommodations that you worked out with the school PLC beforehand, then obviously those would be in play at this point. Okay, so I hope that I have provided adequate information on multi-room test session administration. Like I said, it can be very chaotic because you have so many different people to deal with at one time and a lot of things going on. But with proper communication and preparation, you should have a very successful, smooth going multi-room test session. I did fail to mention during your test monitor duties as you're moving around to the classrooms, although you will not collect any unused test booklets, it is okay for you to collect any answer sheets that are not being used. That way, that's one less thing that they have to turn in. I might even suggest collecting extra scratch paper, but sometimes they do use an additional sheet or two during the second math portion of the test. So I don't want to leave the assistant TAs without scratch paper, but it's well and fine to collect any unused answer sheets at the time that you move from classroom to classroom. If you have any questions or concerns, or if there's something that I didn't cover that you think is important, then send me an email or give me a call. I am in St. Louis, helping the St. Louis MEPS out this week and next week. However, I do have access to my email, and you should all have my cell phone number so you can reach me either way. I will be sending out additional information for the test sessions that I have. We recently had a change in how the test sessions are going to be assigned because we have a TA who is no longer able to travel to Tyler in order to assist with this. So there will be some changes in the testing assignments and who will be going where and how each session will be handled. So all the information that I have pertaining to those test sessions I will be providing to each of you on this week, so that you can be sure that you have everything that you need. Once you receive your additional information, how you prepare for your test session will determine how many any extra material that you need as far as answer sheets, scratch paper, etc. So if you do need additional stuff, be sure to send Rhonda and I an email so that we are tracking that we need to get it out to you as soon as you get it to us. And finally, I just want to thank you guys for all the hard work that you do. Thank you for volunteering to assist Dallas MEPS. Every year they have this really big test, and they really count on Little Rock MEPS covering the Tyler, Texas area. We've been doing it for the last 4 or 5 years, so although it's not an expectation, they do look forward to our support and participation every year, and we really couldn't do it if you guys didn't step up to the game. So thanks a lot for all of that.